Good morning. I'm Taina Litwak, and I have been with the USDA, but I am on administrative leave for reasons which you may know about from reading the newspaper. I will be retiring in September. So thank you for coming. And we were invited to work on a book that Emily Corin conceived probably about 15 years ago, and this storytelling to accelerate climate change solutions. And she's extremely passionate. This was a self-generated project. She brought in, I don't know exactly how many authors are on the whole book. I forgot to do a count, but it's dozens, because there were 5 of us that she invited to work on this chapter. And our chapter is, I'm always forgetting it, because there's so many wonderful chapters in this. She got writers from so many creative fields, movies, TV, songwriting, theater, and visuals as a catalyst for climate science communication. So as opposed to some of the other ones where they're telling stories that are more socially keyed, ours are communicating, our expertise is communicating the science.
What's the name of the book?
Storytelling to accelerate climate change solutions. And actually, my last slide has a QR code on it. The nice thing is that one of the reasons that the publication was delayed as it was she was seeking funding, because this is a public access book. You can go to the Springer website, and like I say, the QR code will be on the last slide, and you can download the book for free, because she fought with Springer to get the funding to be able to distribute this book free, because we think it's so important that people have. Yeah, thank you, Emily. You know, and that she was really passionate about that, and it was really worth it. I mean, I bought a hard copy on Amazon, which would be wonderful if you want a hard copy, but the PDF is free, and it's available on the Springer website. My section, I'm going to talk about part of the chapter that we wrote, and it's what visual science communicators can bring to the SciComm table. And I guess I wanted to go over a little bit of how our field has changed. I started illustrating, we are in the long line of science illustrators. We depict nature, and people have been doing that since people could draw bison on caves. And it got more and more detailed, and we worked for scientists. We weren't generating our own stuff so much. So when I started illustrating, there was still a lot of demand for it. There were dozens of illustrators working at the Museum of Natural History in 1983 when I first got there. And everybody was illustrating on paper in various media. And things evolved, and let's see, I don't have a pointer, but then there was Denril and drafting films, and then the journals started publishing in color, so that became affordable. My first 10 years of my career, I did nothing in color. I did black and white line drawings and ink wash drawings for 10 years, because that's all the researchers could afford to publish. And then everything changed, because then they were publishing online, you could publish in color, the prices dropped, the expectations of the science community changed. So I became a complete digital illustrator. And so all of the color pieces on here, the 3 color pieces in the middle, are all Photoshop. And then the last 15 years of my career have been with the USDA, and the illustration, the piece on the far right is a photograph. Actually, it's a montage of 3 photographs that I took, because the technology has now gotten so good and so inexpensive that most of the researchers are not using illustrations in their papers. At this point, the dozens and dozens of illustrators that used to be at the Museum of Natural History in DC, there were staff illustrators, and there were a lot of contractors. As of once I leave in September, there is 1 left in the entire building. And when she retires, Alice Tangerini, when she retires, they probably will not replace her. So if you're thinking you're going to work in taxonomic descriptions of beautiful pictures of insects or birds. The birds have all been done, the insects have not all been done, but they're not paying us to do more. Because nowadays a scientist can buy a scanning electron microscope that's as big as a large microwave. And they can afford them every lab has one now. So they don't need us the way they used to. That doesn't mean we don't have things to do. We have a lot of things to do. Now we need to be visual storytellers because you can't get a camera to explain a story the way you can with an illustration. And these are just a couple of really cool examples. Jennifer Fairman did this amazingly complex illustration of allergic rhinitis, but it really shows the problem, the anatomy of the problem, the way the problem can manifest. She's storytelling and showing how to test for it. That's the arm pricks and what the mites look like. What's causing it, and then the solutions. She's got the drugs and the delivery systems, and it's a wonderful story. And that was for like a journal article. And then the piece this is also a piece of hers on the right. It was done to be a huge poster for Johns Hopkins. And that's a very complex piece, if you can tell what's going on in there. But she's really, really telling a story, a wonderful story. And so what we need to be able to do is understand that we have important work to do. We need to help facilitate some critical information that the world needs to know this. It's like Fiona was saying, we're a thin film of bacteria that is spread out over the planet, and we've grown to the point where we're really choking the planet. So we need to think about what kind of avenues we can express ourselves with. So this is a wonderful graphic. It was actually done as a film, and each of these the piece on the left is the daily emissions in metric tons of CO2 in Manhattan, and each 33-foot sphere represents 1 metric ton, and then the middle illustration is what the daily volume looks like of those spheres. And then the far right is the annual emissions. So it's just a wonderful graphic, and it was picked up by everyone. The collage there is a collage of some of the 100 articles and blogs, and it was picked up everywhere and referred to widely. So it was a super effective piece of communication image. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the other avenues we have to where can we fit in and work on telling our stories. So we have a list. Research publications and academic training are obviously an avenue where science illustration can be very useful, and climate science communicators like us can really fit in and help. The graphic on the left was done by the researcher. There was no art credit in the publication. It came out in a journal, which means that one of the researchers did it. It's clip art. It's the graphic abstract that was published with the paper. And it's pretty cookie cutter. The one on the right, I did for some of the scientists I work for. The imagery is a little more grabbing, and it's very tailored to the topic of the paper. So we definitely have, if we can convince the academics that we can really improve their product and tell their story, we'll have an outlet there. Another thing that we can contribute to on the research side is as they're doing their work, we can provide the scientists with analyses of the researcher had a film of how the fish was walking, but Kalliopi did, she's the first author on our chapter. So she did a visual analysis with these drawings, which knocked the socks off the researcher. And then the researcher went in a new direction, having seen not the film of the creature walking, but to actually analyze the way Kappy analyzed the motion and stuff. So she really contributed to the work of the science. So we definitely, that's a really fun thing to do. If you can work individually with researchers, we have a lot to give there. So obviously another big outlet for us and that we can reach a lot of people is public outreach, and the clients would be governmental or non-governmental organizations. The problem with that is that they're not using us enough. This is a wonderful illustration by Nicole Fuller, and it's the future of work, human technology frontiers. She did it for the National Science Foundation on a contract, but she really got a lot of depth and breadth of a story. It's incredibly detailed, and you could spend an awfully long time following the narrative around the picture. Unfortunately, there's a lack of use in the government and in the NGOs. They're just not using the kind of communication that we can do and the kind of storytelling that we can do enough. In the federal government, one of the issues with that is that there is no classification for graphics people that actually understand any science. There's a classification for science illustrators, and there's a classification for visual communication specialists. But visual communication specialists essentially don't have to know anything about science at all. So, and they're being hired and they're being asked to tell stories that they don't understand. And I have delivered perfectly finished graphics with all the data on it to communications departments, and then they will remove the Latin names, or they'll re-explain it wrong because they just think they can communicate it better because they're the communications professionals. And the scientists tear their hair out, because then it gets posted on Twitter. These are communications departments that are charged with the public outreach, and they're not science trained. So there really is an avenue, if we can market ourselves, that we have both of this understanding and skill to organizations that are trying to communicate science. And there's quite a lot of them. So to the best of my knowledge, the USDA employs 100,000 people, or they used to. And as far as I know, there was one scientific illustrator employed by the entire Department of Agriculture. They have a lot of visual information specialists, but I was the only science illustrator. And once I leave in September, there will be none in the entire agency. So that's kind of depressing. But these are some graphics that I did. For the one on the left I did for the USDA, and it's about farming and eating insects. And so all the icons are custom, and that was a fun project to work on. Unfortunately, a lot of like Fiona was saying, a lot of the organizations and agencies rely on a lot of clip art and a lot of stock icons. So, and it's to their detriment. Once in a while, you get a client who understands that it would work better if they tell their own story. So I was hired to do the one on the right, where they wanted to talk about developing natural capital markets for ecosystem services. It's like, what is a whale worth? And they took this to the international climate meetings, and we can do this, and we can do it better than a lot of what's being done. The mainstream news media coverage of the climate crisis is spotty, but some of it is very good. And I wanted to show you this wonderful piece that Daisy Chung did with a co-author for Reuters news service, and there we go. Parts of it are animated. So when you're scrolling through the newspaper, you're reading the captions and things. You're getting. It's very engaging. It requires the reader's participation. And this is aimed, obviously, this is a very public piece. But I just thought it's just so effective. you know, because it's the cartoon aspect of it is engaging, but the text content is really it's technical. It's important that people, the imagery invites you in a very non-threatening way, and then you get a lot of information. So I thought this was a really, really good piece. You get these little happy molecules, and you get these really evil molecules. The methane, bad news. Obviously in the mainstream news media, like the piece on the left is one that Fiona did. It's just the facts. It's very straightforward science, but it's beautifully illustrated, and it really explains why it's important. So doing the science sections in newspapers is great. When they decide they're going to do a societal effects of climate change features and involve us, that's another wonderful way to get involved. And then you get the wonderful editorial cartoonists. And I know some of you do work in cartoons, but there's some consummate professionals out there that are doing series, and they have websites, and they're being picked up by everywhere and reused, which I have another thing we can talk about later about reuses and the fact that people grab things out of newspapers and post it on there everywhere. But always credit the illustrators. We know that. Not everyone does. So anyway, this is a great way to disseminate climate change awareness. One of the topics we discuss in the chapter is formal learning environments in classroom textbooks, and I'm not going to go into it much because that's an area that we have very little control over. The big publishers are working with authors, and they have their agendas, and by the time a figure spec gets down to our level, production level, we have no control. So, I mean, it would be good, and this, as you see, you can read on this that textbook publishers are just not including enough information for their audience, and this is college textbooks, and it goes all the way down to first grade. I think there's a lack of, they're just slow. The publishers are behemoths, and I just don't think it's enough on their radar. So one of the ways that local educational communities are making up for that is there are a lot of non-textbook educational products out there being produced by all kinds of organizations that are available to teachers. And this is a great example. Where is it? It's climatecentral.org is a really good source for data and stuff. So they published the graph on the right, this warming bleaching corals on the Great Barrier Reef, and the exercise was the children were given a variety of sources, and they were asked to do an art project. So that beautiful piece on the left was one child's interpretation of this graph about how happy the fish were when the water was cool, everything was great, it was really colorful. And then on the right, as the water gets warmer, you get this darkening, and everything is, she didn't do bleaching as white, but she did it as this child expressed it as gloom, and so it's dark. But it's really a great illustration on this child's part and I think that you can tell she got a lot out of looking at that graph and interpreting it for herself. So that was probably a little life-changing experience for this person. And this was an exercise sort of packaged by the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute. And their lesson plans are available free online. So helping to promote that would be a good thing. And there are so many websites that have these sort of plans. Then there's the avenue of children's literature in magazines, which is a place where we could potentially have some impact, because certainly in children's literature, you can market, you can create a project, you can self-generate projects. And so we have that avenue. And magazines, we can solicit to the magazines. If they're having 15 people contact them saying, look what I do climate things and you need me. And so that's something we can do. This was an example, a wonderful series of some of the researchers are starting to use picture books in their outreach programs, which I think is a growing awareness of the science community that it's important to do. And then there's the whole picture books and graphic novels and children's magazines and things. The series on the right is like one of my favorite, but the Magic School Bus did a climate change book. And if any of you have ever had kids, hopefully I raised mine with these Magic School Bus books, and they're incredibly detailed narratives with really engaging characters. And then the book on the left is something I picked up fairly recently, but it's a stunning book. It's a large format climate emergency atlas. I mean, isn't that brilliant? And it's just great. And so then there's a lot of stories that are being marketed to older audiences in popular publications like Scientific American and National Geographic. And the piece on the left, I just love. It was a long spread. It was like 8 pages of a beautifully done graphic novel, Juicing the Storm, and it was all about climate change and weather patterns changing. And then the piece on the right is done by Liz Sisk, who's here somewhere. Thank you, Liz. It's beautiful. But so there's a fair amount of really good stuff coming out in the science magazines, which hits a certain portion of the population in the United States. Then there's informal learning environments. So people are walking by a museum, or they're going to an art center or a festival, and their community centers and are doing activities that are raising awareness about climate change. Like the one on the left was a picture from this really cool exhibit they did at the Boston Museum, Science Museum. And unfortunately, it's not running anymore. The pictures on the right are of a show that just opened in April. It's a small section of the Art Cross Climate collection that was put together as part of the National Climate Assessment 5, which came out in the fall of 2024. And the first author on that paper, massive study, 13 agencies, there were hundreds and hundreds of co-authors across the whole spectrum of federal government agencies that work in climate and or used to work in climate. So she decided she wanted to have an art and climate section, and so she put together a juried competition, which is available on, which was advertised on Cafe Press, which one of the speakers mentioned yesterday as how she found her mural project. Cafe Press is, I forget what it's for, the acronym is. Call for entries, thank you. So it's a website, call for entries. If you Google it, you'll find it. And this show was free to enter. It was listed on call for entries, and I entered a piece. And so they had 800 entries. They narrowed it down to 90, and we were all on the climate. We are the banner images on the chapter heads in the National Climate Assessment. Unfortunately, the National Climate Assessment was removed from the web a few weeks ago, but then they put it back on deep in the NOAA website. They took it off. Climate.org went dark completely 2 weeks ago, and they say they nested the Climate Assessment 5 back into the NOAA website, but they didn't put in the climate and art section. I am not amused. The show is still up, though I have to say the director of the museum was a little concerned about opening it because it opened on Earth Day in April, and he was a little concerned that we maybe shouldn't open the show, but he did. So, the Museum of Natural History at Smithsonian in Washington D.C. So it's kind of prominent. People live down the street who really, if they really were aware it was there, they really might get angry. Anyway, so there's a lot of informal learning that is being studied. people are trying to measure the impact of some of this stuff. So this is just a reference to, and it's some imagery from a study that was done, and the results were pretty conclusive. They suggested that artistic representations of data compared with the scientific data graphs, just linear, just lines in a couple of colors, they can mitigate the political division in an individual's perceived relevance of climate change. So it can really help to the way you package the information, the kind of things that we can do in our storytelling can really make a difference, according to some of these studies that are being done. Infusing the database communications with emotions and portrayals of shared experiences can unite individuals who might otherwise not relate to the information. So here's a couple of great examples of artistic representation of data. The piece, I have not met the artist on the left there. Oh my goodness, where's her name? I've redone these slides so many times. Oh, there it is. It's Jill Pelto. And she had a piece in the NCA 5, and that's how I came across her work. But she has a very deep website. And she doesn't work for any one organization. She seems to be all over the place, and I mean all over the planet. I was trying to get in touch with her before this, and she was in Iceland working with some researchers. And she does these amazing artwork. And Diane Burko is another, she considers herself a painter, but her work is very narrative. They're not illustrations. She does they're huge paintings. She works large. But they really communicate. I mean, look at that 4-panel piece. It's very, very evocative. Interestingly enough, 2 of the 5 co-authors on our paper ended up over the past, well, I think we went into producing climate graphics as public art. And I think Cappy started before I did. And these are some wonderful plastic pieces about plastic waste and plastic volume and what the implications of that. So she actually uses plastic and sews it into these shapes. And the one on the left was, you can read it, but she had a friend save a whole year's worth of plastic from her household. And this woman of household of 4, and she did it assiduously, and she washed it and mailed it and sent it once a month. She would send it in a package. And Cappy was sewing. So each one of these strips is a month. So it's a month of use of single-use plastics by this one family of 4. So each strip, and so some of them are longer than others. They must have cooked at home those months, or they went to the farmer's market. Maybe that's a month that they didn't eat out or didn't. Hard to say. But it's a really, really effective piece, and she's been able to show it in a few art centers and museums. And the piece on the right is fascinating, and and it's only partly done because it's an infographic. It gets bigger every time she shows it because it's a data set of 70 years of plastic production, at least right now. And each of the big circle quilts with the color in the middle represents the amount of plastic we manufacture globally in that year. So each one of these big circles is a year, and then the little circle near it, the little tiny black circle, is the amount that was recycled of that. You can see it clearly in the dark blue circle on the right has that little black circle on the far right. That's the amount that was recycled compared to the amount that was produced. So it's data driven. It's data packaged in a way that is just fascinating. So I started doing this series of sculptures that have to do with plastic waste. And this is an example of the sort of the second one that I did. It's 6.5 by 13.5 feet. And it was in a gallery in Baltimore, and it was, the next one I'm going to do in December is going to be a graph, and that's the diagram you see on the right. And it's going to start out at floor level, and you're going to proceed down into a 16-foot room, And as you walk into the room, this pile, there's a pile of this plastic waste that is just going to grow up the wall, and it'll be over your head by the time you get towards the corner into the room, and then it's going to wrap around the back wall. So you're going to be underneath this massive amount of plastic waste, and it's all painted gray because it's really all the same toxic petrochemical stuff, even though when we buy it and use it and throw it away, it's pink and sparkly and smooth and shiny and all the different things that plastic is, but it actually is the same dead dinosaur toxic stuff. So that's why it's gray. And the photo is that the gallery director wanted to have a panel, so I brought in someone from World Wildlife, because World Wildlife Association has a massive plastics unit. I mean, they employ a dozen people, lawyers and outreach people, and they work just on plastic treaties, and because they're working with corporations, you know, they go to Pepsi-Cola and say, what can you do? What can you do in this country? This is what you're doing to this country with your production. What can you do to change that? So it's great. These organizations are there, and they need us even if they don't know it. So we need to figure out a way to communicate and embed ourselves in with these groups that are doing such important work, I think. So visuals as a catalyst for climate science communication. That's our chapter title. And I'm focusing on the word catalyst because the catalyst is, I think, what we need. We could be that, and I think we need to be that. Something that causes or speeds up change or reaction, because time is a little bit short on this. You know, obviously, even if suddenly pollution levels dropped on the planet and plastic waste cut by half on the planet, there's still such a volume, and the temperatures would continue to rise for quite a while. There's a lot of science has already been done about that. But that doesn't mean you can't we can't do nothing. We have to work at it. So what we are up against, like I said, we're up against an issue in the United States because this is about the NCA 5, and I've already talked about that a little, because, you know, Project 2025, they really just want to cut the agencies to shreds, and they don't seem to believe that science is something that should be funded and research is important. And that is going to affect us. I mean, the budgets for visual communications are not, they were never great in the, you know, 5 years ago they weren't great, and they're not going to be any better in the next 5 years. But so that kind of gives us some responsibility, because we need to act our values. So because, and I'm all for it. I don't want to do anything for free, but I think it's important that we get involved. And a good way to do that is to work on some collaborations. And I want to show you a little film. This is a great example.
You're at 10 feet, you're at 5 feet, you're at 8 feet, you are at 4 feet.
At a community event in northern Miami, artist and climate activist Xavier Cortada is reminding residents just how vulnerable their homes are. Each number represents how many feet a property sits above sea level. The idea, says Cortada, to make people aware and get them talking in a city where sea level rise is becoming an existential crisis.
It calls out the problem. It literally creates this process where neighbor tells neighbor, these are the facts. This is the quantifiable problem that we have.
His underwater project starts with a visit to this website where participants enter their address and discover their home's elevation. After writing that number on a sign designed by Cortada, residents place them in their own front yards.
That's what my art is about. You invite your neighbor to get in a conversation with you about that, and together you begin to figure out what you can do about it. And enough of that happens, I think we can begin to move the needle on this.
Self-generated project, really impressive work. And he actually, he has shows in galleries, and he had a big show at the National Academy of Sciences down in Washington of his paintings and things, because he does static work also. And he was in one of his static pieces. It was actually a photograph of an intersection, because he did a big painting project, and he's a Florida resident, and he did numbers painted on intersections, in very, full intersections, street intersections, of how many feet they were above sea level. So how threatened they were by sea level rise. And some of them had the big number 3 in the middle, and some of them had a big number 7. And one of those was in the climate assessment show. Oops. Here's another stunning example of visually communicating data. Look at that. This was a wildfire smoke spreading across America that was done by 2 reporters and graphics people at the New York Times in the summer of 2021. So they're working with individual data shots and footage from NASA and NOAA, but how they manipulated that data to make it into the visual that you see here. That took a lot. It's obviously way above my skill set, but it's just so communicative. That swirl of purple and orange, I just think it's magnificent. And I made sure that was in the chapter because it really caught me. Here's another piece. This one is more in what we think of as what I was trained in communication. It's a map, it's diagrams, and it's a really nice piece done that Daisy Chung did for the Washington Post. But it has an animated element also. It's about these using the cold water in a lake to cool a whole town. But watch this video. Her animation is lovely. The warm water, the cool water, which way it's pumping. Isn't that great? This is a magnificent piece that was done in the New York Times, and we couldn't use it in the book because we couldn't afford it. They even just to use a still from it. I am using this in this light as a fair use sort of a thing because it's a one-off. But and I appreciate the fact that our culture lets us do that. But it's a beautiful graphic, talks about the problems and what's going on and how bad it is. The title of the article is Bad Future, Better Future. So it's kind of narrating like all the how it's going to kind of get bad. And extreme heat and drought will make wildfires even more dangerous. Glaciers and ice sheets will continue to melt, rising sea levels. And then you get to the bottom, and I'll just let it run for a little bit. Sorry, you can look it up to get the text later. So it gets to here, and things are bad, and the coral's all bleached, and then it goes a better future, and then it goes sideways, which is very cool. And the light dawns, and you have options, and things could happen, and you see there are choices to be made, and it really expresses that very well. And the graphics are really non-threatening. I mean, it's aimed at a young audience, but it's aimed at I think it's aimed at everyone, but it's definitely aimed at so that a parent could sit with a child and look at this. I just thought it was a fabulous piece. Okay, so there you go. Oh wait, I'll get to just to the very end here. So that's the end. The girl gets home on the bike, and you can see the front piece with the beginning, bad futures, better future, and then the last part is the child gets home to her mom on a bike. It's a wonderful story. All right, so I think what we need to do is think about opportunities. We can look around and find and create opportunities to be a catalyst for this. If you think it's important, we have things we can do about it. How can we affect change? What stories do you want to tell? I think these are, and the piece on the right is something that I just came across when I was looking, and I think there's a lot of this going on. They're doing a Climate Week New York City, and this is happening in a month and a half, and in Manhattan, and there are going to be a large number of speakers, and they're doing 14 climate communication events in New York City in a week. And so there's speakers, and there's, if you go to the website, you see what's going on. There's a lot of expertise running around in New York. And, there's a lot of people working really hard addressing the causes and the characteristics and the impacts of human-induced climate change. And there's room for us in there. There really is. So the website is down there on there. So I'm just going to close with this slide and take questions. Fiona, come on up. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, any questions, comments, enthusiasm?
Do you want us to come down or just speak from here?
Just speak from there, as
Okay.
loud as you can.
Sure. Okay, so I'm curious about, there's so many resources that are being stripped from climate.gov and from federal websites. And these are our tax dollars that we paid for these. So I'm curious, like when the climate literacy guide that I designed was taken down earlier this year, I started posting it on my own site, and then multiple other organizations picked it up, and now it's being posted internationally, which is great. So that the information is being preserved, but it's being preserved in a very piecemeal fashion. And what I'm curious about is who, or if there are organizations that are starting to capture this information and share it in a more centralized location. Because we're really in a Fahrenheit 451 situation in which information is being lost and stolen from us very quickly. And so I'm just curious if you happen to know about that, and if you do, could you speak to that?
Do you have anything to say?
You can go first if you want. What was the last part that you said, Becky?
Say again?
The last
I'm
sentence.
just curious if you happen to know of any organizations like NGOs or scientific research organizations that are helping to preserve the data that's being stripped from federal websites.
Yeah.
The reports that we design, the work that we do is being taken down.
I must say, the Wayback Machine is your friend. Because the NCA 5 is there in all of its 1,800 pages. It was even there the weeks that after they took climate.gov down. You could still get to the whole thing through the Wayback Machine. And now that they've embedded it in the NOAA website, you can get to that particular product without the art and climate section. That I believe you can only get through the Wayback Machine at this point. It's called the Internet Archive, and there is a thing out there in the cloud that has a capture of pretty much every website that ever was, even the ones that are taken down, and they're archived. So if you look up Internet Archive, it's all in there.
It's mostly government websites. It's not literally everything. But if you are a government scientist who work with the Wayback Machine to get your stuff on there, a lot of people have done that before giant migrations, so they're of websites where everything get lost, not just purposeful taking it down. It's a great resource.
I'd add one more thing. There's a data rescue project portal.
That's what I'm thinking
Yes.
of. I'm starting to hear about this, and like there's an organization, some scientists in Australia who are hosting the climate literacy guide, other vital resources that have been basically stripped. So,
Could you-
But I just was wondering if there was like a centralized effort. I'm seeing little things.
Yeah.
The project portal page.
Could-
To put everything in there.
And it says all the data.
It's called Data Rescue.
Data rescue. Could you repeat that to me so I can get you?
Data Rescue Project portal.
Data rescue project portal.
And you can actually send in a request if there are sites that you're concerned they're going to get stripped.
Ah.
And volunteers will kind of go to these websites to get as much as they can out to host them elsewhere.
Well, hopefully somebody knew that the NCA 5 might go down. It surprised me when it did, but I'm sure people who are a little more keyed into what was going on were pretty aware of that ahead of time.
And anyone can volunteer to help this work.
So, I guess.
I just wanted to say thank you for reposting the climate impact. What was the climate impact?
And called the climate literacy guide, and it featured
Yeah.
work from part-time climate, from that exhibit.
Yeah.
And it's just a fantastic resource. There were 23 federal agencies in the Biden White House who worked on this over a period of years.
Yeah, I think that we could all help by reposting and sharing things. And they, they really can't erase the majority of the things that they've took down, because anyone who has worked on something for the government, we have those files on our computer. I'm backing up my files on my hard drive, so they can be republished later.
One of the other things that happened this last month or so was that the NCA 6 was started, the production had been started on the NCA 6, obviously, because the National Climate Assessment 5 was published in 2024. So that this number 6 had been well started. So there were scientists in all these different agencies who were already working on it. And there was a staff of 30 with a director and a director of production. And the 2 days before the show opened at the Museum of Natural History, they all got fired. So they were all riffed on a Friday, and we had the opening at Natural History on Tuesday. So that's pretty grim. The director, I met the new director and her director of operations. So if you go to the website, you'll see their names were still on the website, and then they list all the positions that used to have people in them, and they're just titles because they fired them all. So that's pretty grim.
Oh, I have one now. You can keep that one.
Oh, okay.
Hi, so here in Boston at Northeastern University, Boston University, they've started to have some programs like there's a graduate certificate in civic science, and it's for scientists to, it's like a low cost, 4 courses only, trying to get them, better at communicating with storytelling and stuff. I was wondering if you've brought your book to anybody like that, or tried to reach out to them about using illustrators.
That would be a really good thing to do. I wonder who's teaching.
She was a head at the Scientific American magazine.
Oh, is it Jen Christensen?
Maybe.
She was the art director for the science at
I think so.
at Scientific American.
Yeah, but now she's the head of SciComm there. So
At Boston University.
don't quote.
Oh no, okay. Well, I guess we should look. This is something we should look into, obviously.
Yeah, I was
Thank
excited
you.
to read about the program, but I'm afraid of like what you said about maybe it focuses too much on writing, and that if artists could get more involved and have collaboration during that certificate program would be really good.
Oh yeah. I don't know. Whoever's in Boston, could you all look that up and get in touch
I
with
think
someone?
that is one area that might take more organization on behalf of the GNSI.
It could come out of the organization.
Because we have an education division, but right now we're mostly focusing on creating workshops to teach each other skills. But what if our education division also advocated on behalf of our profession for science communication program. I think that would be a great idea.
Thank you. Oh, one more.
Just a quick note about the Wayback Machine. So I work in HIV vaccine research, which is right at the crossroads of quote unquote DEI and vaccine hesitancy, let's say.
Deeply.
And we have many websites that are community outreach and education, and so I was very afraid that a lot of this was going to be lost. You actually don't have to work with Wayback Machine. I'm not a web person, like I'm not a web developer, but I just enter the URL and then the Wayback Machine automatically just goes in
And finds
saves
it.
the website. So if there's any websites that you are worried about, just go in and archive those. That's something that we can all do as a team.
Oh, thank you so much. Cool. And you had one question. I saw your hand up before. What? Scott?
So how frequent has it been that advocacy organizations like yours, a group like yours, have been contacting groups like, let's say, the National Association of Science Teachers to see whether presentations like yours can be added to their agenda of conferences? Or I'm thinking targeting this kind of information for teachers who would be teaching, let's say, middle school and high school organizations or groups rather than, scientists.
Well, I don't know what the advocacy organizations are doing. I'm not sure who you're referring to.
Anybody that is promoting what you've been talking about today. The whole idea of graphics and the use of graphics and climate change issues that can be accessed more easily by people who are not in the field themselves.
Well, there's no organization that's working on this, as far as I know. I mean, if there was one, it might be the Guild, but that's not what this organization is. Supports our members. We don't do outreach like that to clients. We're an educational association, so it would be something that would be interesting if there was a focus group or within this organization to start something like that. That would be pretty cool.
I think science professors tend to forget how much it overlaps with science, and it's very observation-based. And when you're working on data visualization, you become a mini expert at whatever it is you're trying to portray because you want to make sure that it's accurate. And so I think that including data visualization and illustration skills, even if it's just drawing marine algae, teaches students to observe and be better communicators.
Right, and that stuff is ending up in the educational modules, yeah.
I just wanted to comment on that. So I'm a former high school biology teacher, and NSTA itself has been heavily promoting this kind of work with students and with teachers. So I think they even have another conference themed on it fairly recently in the past 5 years or so. So there's a lot of room for continued collaboration and work with them. And the next generation science standards, which have been adopted by most states, do promote visual science thinking quite heavily, like making infographics and stories. So there's a lot of room there, I think, for visual science communicators to get involved in the education sector.
Okay, one more question. Okay, Kim.
Yeah,
I think this is so great. I just want to highlight what you're talking about with the just previous comment about, it can be a very bleak outlook right now, and how important it is, the power of collaboration and putting our work out there, and that we don't need clients to show that power, that we can do self-generating work and start by leveraging our time together, and then that can snowball. And I think there's some artists that have been very successful at that. For example, Jane Kim, who started her mural project along Corridor 61, was a Kickstarter fund, and it launched her career. And so you may have a passion project, you may share that with others here or elsewhere, but don't wait for the work to come to you to solve these problems, and don't look at this landscape negatively. We can do a lot through our work, and I think it's really important that we take this whole wide landscape together and stay positive.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
That's really what we were trying to. What she said. Thanks for coming. Wait, oh, I know, I said I would. Oh, and here's the QR code for the publication.
Thank you so much.